Hello. I wanted to make this video in order to challenge the ideas that we have in our heads about men. I'm talking specifically about the fathers, the grandfathers, the brothers and the husbands of this world, all the men in our lives that are unrelated or related to us, and how we view them. What images do these men bring in our heads when we think about them, and how that relates to our inner vulnerabilities? Just think of a man that you admire, a man that has done something in this world and in this life, in terms of either achievements or in terms of generally his presence or the effect his presence has had in this world or in your life in particular. That man would invariably be strong-headed, stoic, heroic, present and strong in every moment. Every little bit of his humanity is subtracted in that image that you have in your head. His weaknesses, his fears, his doubts and worries, his real self is subtracted from any perception that you have of him into something that is surreal, something that can never and could have never been real. This made me think of the men that I admire in my life, and how much these men stand above all others. Their suffering and their experiences have been a source of inspiration in their lives in order to become something greater. And it appeared to me that if I had not had this opportunity to view all men and all women in their very worst through my job, I would have had this extremely false idea about men, that idea of them being utilities and disposable and yet unbreakable beings. Actually, that's what's made them shine above all others. You know, how long they represented this holy idea of the unbreakable and stoic man. Those men were superheroes made of steel. They would not yield, they would not bend, and though myself a man, I could never reach this idea of superhuman masculinity that these men represented. This idea, it has invaded all of us. It exists in all of us. I mean, the stories of every hero are exaggerated. The fear that he faced is downplayed. The sacrifice is celebrated, and in the midst of all that, we're all programmed to think that we cannot allow ourselves to feel, to hurt, or to be weak in any moment in our lives. Anything and everything that makes a man vulnerable is seen as an instability, as the machine malfunctioning. Through this continuous programming, we dehumanize our own selves. It would appear that this is the perception that we have about men. I'm talking specifically about how men think of their masculinity, but I'm sure this idea is perpetuated into females too. It seems to be that this idea of superhuman masculine men is celebrated by men and hated by feminists. Very recently I had this discussion with a female relative of mine who was complaining that people generally don't inherently respect or listen to women. She agreed with me that men seem to be displaying power and dominance inherently because of the very fact that they're men. She had her degrees and thought she was perfectly qualified to earn that respect off the cuff, because someone should know that you have your degrees, I guess, just by looking at you. And that perception that people have as men knowing more or wielding more power is an unrealistic reality, I guess, in the present climate. However, the reality of the matter is, the voice of a man rings truth and trustworthiness in the ears of women and men alike, more so than women do. Especially when they display a figure of authority. Be it a doctor, a lawyer, a CEO, an army captain, whatever that might be, a man is always taken more seriously than a woman in a similar position. This isn't because people do not understand that women can be equal. This is not because of social engineering in favor of the man. This is because the man's difference in stature, lower volume voice, calmer at times demeanor, demands respect, and people respond to it. This is because of thousands and thousands of years of evolution, and it will not go away because women go to universities now. This is why it is men that control crowds and not women. This is why male voices are chosen to give instructions. This is why men lead legions of men to their own deaths and in war. It is in the nature of a man and a woman to listen to a man. This is not sexism. This is not illusionary or delusionary thinking. It is what it is. Simply a fact. So imagine this effect extended to its maximum capacity through the powers of imagination, storytelling, book writing, and a strongly biased memory in movies. A man, or the masculine man, becomes a symbol of power. And many of us that grew with fathers around remember our fathers as these strong and dominant figureheads. Remember the effect they extended and exerted in our own lives. The lucky few that were raised with fathers nowadays, they saw the effect a man has on a child's life. And I don't need statistics to prove that. For men that we look up to, there is this almost unspoken power, an air of confidence, a bravado of sorts. You and I and everyone sees a man for what he does, and as a society we fail to see the man for who he is underneath it all. And to that, we fail to understand what made such men, what drove such men, what fears these men had to overcome, how they thought the way they did in order to become the people that they are now. And even when it comes to our fathers, many of us see strength and actions, but we do not see the man. Few of us will look deeper, and fathers rarely talk for things that go on deeper than the surface. Even in the world around us, we feel like strangers. We feel like we're somehow different, even when we ourselves are such men. We see the actions, we see the image, and we don't see the man underneath it all, even if these men are close to us. For some of us who enjoy looking deeper than the very surface, talking to the average man and getting through to him in order to reach something real, feels almost like a battle that most of the times he will win by simply walking away, by deflecting, by rejecting your reality, call you gay or whatever else. But I'm a man, and I know many men, and I know we all feel that we have all cried, that we're scared, and we all have doubts all the time. Sure, there are things that drive us, things that make us shift our thoughts away from these feelings and these thoughts. There are situations that force us to behave in a manner that the mask simply needs to go on. And believe me, I wear it whenever I have to converse with colleagues of mine. But there is a deeper truth inside every man, or most men at least. There is a man inside every man who cares and worries, who takes care of someone in his life, who looks after himself and has no idea about the future. A man who is scared of the responsibilities that a new father takes as soon as that child is born. Yet we get portrayed in the media as dangerous. And statistically, yeah, we're more dangerous. We lash out. We hold on to too much regret, too much fear, and too much anger. But inside every man, there is another man. But that fear hides that man away. We get portrayed as being afraid of the modern woman, when we simply embrace women who may have something more to talk about. We're told that we feel emasculated by successful women, that we're still boys that are looking for our own mothers, yet nothing could be further from the truth. You see, very few men will acknowledge that there is something real inside them. It is almost as you're de-evaluating that very man when you suggest that. I mean, my father is a really hard motherfucker. Always has been. He never drank, worked his body to oblivion, and has never dropped the mask but twice in his life in front of me to talk about something real and what he deemed to be important. And he taught me to do the same. He also tried with his methods that I talked about before in order to take away my rebel spirit, and he saved his moment of humanity for himself only when no one else could see. The revelation to me that my father was not a bad man came to me when I was a teenager, somewhere in my mid-teens, back when physical force was irregular and we were going at it with him all the time. But at some point during those years, I got sick and required surgery almost immediately, because I was trying to be a dick, about the pain that I was feeling. I was pretending I wasn't feeling very much of it. And they got to me quite late, so the procedure needed to be done as an emergency. And I was what I now know to call septic. I was rushed in theater within minutes of reaching the hospital. Basically, as soon as the surgeon glanced at my blood results, he said, "I just need to go." I don't remember much, but the surgery went well, and I was alright in the end of it. A couple of years later, after that, me and my father were arguing and fighting again about some shit, as we always did, and certain things around the house may have broken. At that point I was aware of my strength, and I think my father knew my strength was getting, to the point that it was almost his equal. And I mean, back then I did not respect him. I did not see any part of him that I wanted in me. But my mother sat me down and wanted to talk to me about that. And she told me about the story that I didn't know, a side story to my story. Perhaps the story that my father didn't know I knew either, or that my mother knew. It seemed to be that on that day that I was sick, that day that I was rushed in theatre, my father found my father crying in the hospital hallways. And he was crying like, as only men can cry, tears that you just can't hold back. She saw him, but she didn't approach. She left him to it. And when he came back to see her, it was as if nothing happened. Back then I realized that I, just like my father, was doing the same thing. Acting, putting up a front, to be or look or appear as someone greater than who I felt. I did things that scared the living shit out of me and remained hard-headed and fixated on my decisions even when there were a billion doubts. Because that's what men do. And perhaps that is true. Perhaps this is what men do. But this is not what or who men are. I began seeing it all differently. My heroes, the important people throughout history, men who led men in battle, and all of them. I began to see a bigger picture that inside every man there are responsibilities that he must act upon. And that man can take the best or the worst decisions, but inside every man there is another man who wants to be reached and wants to be found. But inside every man there is a man that denies this self, refuses to accept it, sees it as feminine or weak, and does not acknowledge that man, as that man portrays weakness in him. That is not who the world or the family wants, but within close and honest friends, that is the man that you will get. That is the true man that exists within each one of us. None of us is made of stone. None of us is a fucking island. We exist and we crave connection. And I'm not talking about pussy here, sex, women, commitment, or anything like that. I'm talking about the human connection, a true human connection with someone else. And I worry when I see intelligent men deny that, reject that, and refuse that, and portray that refusal, if you like, as strength. It is not strength, it is a rejection of yourself, and a throwaway in the dumpster of what makes you you. And I believe that if we need to understand something, is that we need to accept ourselves, and acknowledge ourselves, and grow with what we know. And we should never fall in the traps that all men seem to fall into, of trying to be someone that they're not, of acting a role all the time. Because that's how you live your life in quiet desperation. And whether you're MGTOW, whether you're not, you don't want to be like everyone else. Thank you for listening.